everyone, I'm Ursula Tavender, the Content Director here at Flexpo Business. Welcome to the session on the future of management. So I am absolutely thrilled to be joined by Ben Foulkes, who is the MD of Futureproofing at Hoxby and a business psychologist, Valentine, who's the Head of Employee Experience at Cambridge Assessment, Holbrook, founder and creator of Detox, and Liese, the founder of the Lightbulb tree. I think it's fair to say that our panel today are extraordinarily passionate about changing the world of work and making it more inclusive and flexible. And that's been the case long before coronavirus became part of our lives. So today we're here to have a discussion about how to equip managers to really effectively manage flexible and remote and blended teams, and to have a discussion about what the future of management looks like now that that blend is going to be part of the world of work moving forward, thankfully. So to kick off then, I'd like to come to you first, because there's a real paralysis, isn't there, with companies that I guess find themselves unable or stifled in terms of the options that they feel able to offer their teams for flexible working, because they can't offer the same thing to everybody because of different functions and different roles. How do you think managers can best tackle this one?
Yeah, I think we've seen this with Hoxby and the sort of clients that we work with, and there's all sorts of different possibilities being thrown around, but I think you can cut through everything, cut through the noise, if you like, with flexible working by adopting sort of a simple principle of just giving employees the choice of when and where they work. At Hoxby, we call this work style. So every Hoxby, and Hoxby was founded with the belief that people should be allowed to have that choice and that they will make adult decisions about when and where they work in order to get their objectives met. So I really think the key is actually to stop debating the policies and debating all the different possible options, and actually just adopt that as a principle, because we've seen all the psychology research shows that having that autonomy is critical for our well-being, so for our mental health, but also for our engagement at work and for our productivity. So it's a bit of a win-win situation when we start treating everyone like adults in that sense.
Sounds so simple when you put it like that, doesn't it? Liese, what do you think about this one?
I think this is a really common problem where, and often managers just feel that they need to be able to be fair and offer everybody the same solution, and actually equality doesn't have to be the same. I mean, the whole point is being able to create a solution that works for individuals and delivers the business objectives. So it's very much about there won't be a one size fits all. And for many managers that can sort of vaguely resemble the brain exploding emoji, because it just feels too much to control and to be able to manage.
Mm. And it's that key thing, letting go of control, isn't it? Like, actually, that's the thing that we need to help our managers do, and like actually helping them then respect people's work style that they can't control, you know.
Yeah, it's trusting people and individuals to find their own way of work, their own work preferences. You know, people being in a location between hour X and hour Y doesn't necessarily mean they're working at their best. And I think it's the potential of managers understanding there's a potential to get so much more from their people and for them to be healthier.
And I think that's why when you ask people, it has such an impact, isn't it? Because they know best how they can deliver best.
Mm-hmm.
But I think when it comes to creating that kind of team approach to flexible working that gives people that autonomy and invite that kind of level of engagement, that can really scare managers, can't it? Because they're not confident in terms of how to build that culture themselves. So, Sam, I know you've been on an absolutely incredible journey at Cambridge Assessment with respect to supporting managers in implementing flexible working. So, what support do they need to be able to make it work?
I think in a lot of ways it kind of comes back to the previous question, and something that we've really kind of pushed very hard and enshrined in the policy is that flexible working arrangements will look different team to team, individual to individual. And the kind of pushback we got from flexible workers, it's not fair. This team has a different arrangement, or I have a different arrangement to that person over there. And one of the things we want to make clear is that's good. Inconsistency and everybody finding what works for them is a good thing. It's a sign that policies are working. It's a sign that you're managing the person, not trying to apply a kind of one size fits all approach. And so when we started kind of this whole journey of really trying to modernise flexible working and modernise the way we work, I think it was that it wasn't the managers themselves, it was the perception of managers, perhaps the management culture that we had, which kind of said, you have to manage like this. This is what this team can do. And starting to break that down was the really important first step. And kind of the key part of that is, really reinforcing that message to managers that managing people is not an add-on to your day job. It's not an on top of your job. It is the core part of your job. Managing people is what makes your team productive and what makes you effective. And that's such an important thing. So just encouraging managers to find the time and space and be supported to have the time and space to manage people. And at the same time, we sort of introduced all this flexible working stuff and really pushed it. We got rid of our EPD cycle. You have a check-in at 6 months, and then you have another check-in after another 6 months, and you tick a box to say you've done well or you haven't done well this year. To move to a model where every couple of weeks you chat to people and you chat about what's working, what's not working, what's coming up, what you need to do. And flexible working is part of that. Flexible working is, over the next couple of weeks, you've got this project to do. What time do you need? What space do you need? Where are you going to do it most effectively? How are you going to do it most effectively? And that sense that flexible working changes. It's different for every different project you're doing, and it should flex, it should vary, and it should be different. And so that's the kind of support we wanted to put in place, just how to have those conversations and making it okay to role model from the top. It's okay to do this. It's okay to let people work from home. It's okay for somebody to have an arrangement which doesn't work, because you can negotiate it and come back to it. So making that really visible. And the other side is just looking at management culture as well. And actually, a lot of the time we tend to blame managers for things, say, oh, we've got terrible managers, our middle managers are awful. But actually, that's probably not true. A lot of times there's a lot of perceptions. Well, so there's one of these sort of statistics always fall back in when we have these conversations. When we do our flexible working surveys, which we do quite regularly in our engagement surveys, there's one question in there which is, my manager trusts me to work flexibly and get my work done. 95% of people strongly agree with that statement. My manager trusts me. When we ask the question, what's the biggest barrier to flexible working in the organisation? About 75% of people say managers don't trust people. And those things can't be, they can't both be true. So we have a kind of perception of a management culture which is getting in the way, but individual managers are really supportive. So it's getting those managers talking to each other and really sort of reinforcing that culture is quite pro-flexible working. I think that's the kind of support we need put in place, and just to play that up and reinforce that and really reinforce the role modelling.
Can I jump in here?
Sure.
I think probably, I get what you're saying there about the trust thing, and I wonder whether there's a language issue, because I think the word trust is just so misunderstood.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that one is right and one is wrong. I just think that there are two, probably more than two, different perceptions about what trust really is. If managers look at LinkedIn today, they will see that one of the greatest things you can do to forge a good, not even flexible working culture, any culture, is to trust your people. And the thing is if you talk to one person about what trust really means, one person might say, well, it's just asking somebody to go and do something and then just stepping back and waiting to the day it's supposed to be delivered and then coming back and it'll be done. It's like, well, that is trust by what I think, but I'm not sure that's what management is in my perception. I think trust is about giving a very clear direction as to what it is one would like to achieve, and then being involved as much as you need to, but not more than you need to ensure that you're comfortable as a manager that is occurring. That for me is trust, and it's that monitoring, it's that just being comfortable that things are okay, just looking enough to the point where it doesn't make somebody feel like they're being micromanaged. That is the real talent. I think flexible working isn't about trusting people, it's about managing them. And we just have to agree what managing really means. And I think that means understanding what trust really means.
And
I think one thing I think I've spent a lot of time talking about this is trust is not abdicating responsibility. Trust is not saying go and get on with it.
But to many it is.
we got stuck in this to start with, and I think it was an obstacle as we were trying to say, manager, you have to trust your people, and then it was one group of managers I was doing kind of a focus group with, say, we broadened it out and said, well, yeah, we have to trust people, but people have to trust their manager, that their manager has their back, and their manager is going to support them, and their manager is going to help them find a way through. But managers also have to trust the organisation, that the organisation's got their back. So if I'm the manager who's saying to my team, go and find your own path and work flexibly, I as a manager have to be sure that the organisation's got my back. So it's kind of all the way around. I think, yeah, management is important. It's leadership, and it's leading people, and that trust that someone's got my back, someone will support me. That's what's really, really important. But it goes all directions. It's not simply managers are saying to people, I trust you, go and do your own thing, don't bother me with it. That's a recipe for disaster.
And I think also with that point on leadership, it's about self-awareness. So Paul, you were saying sort of involved enough, but not too much. And it's knowing how you come across as well to your teams and to other people. So we talk a lot about developing self-awareness, and we've done research on our own sort of virtual leaders and virtual managers and what makes them effective in Hoxby to kind of create this sort of mental map. And one of the big things, which you also mentioned there's some before, is, you know, role modeling the right types of behaviors, but also then being aware of how your behaviors are coming across. So like for me, I have a derailer around being a bit overly cautious sometimes, and that can break trust because I'm not acting quick enough and maybe not over communicating like you need to in a remote environment. And if you don't do that, then maybe that erodes trust, or maybe just the perception of that sort of relationship is really important, and that can lead to this sort of breakdown. So it's absolutely not about just saying off you go and do it, unless you have someone who is incredibly experienced and competent and knows exactly what they're doing and has understood you. But absolutely about developing your own self-awareness and developing some of the skills around communication that you might need to be more effective virtually.
I think that's a really good point, Ben, because, you know, understanding yourself is really critical, but also understanding others. So really getting to understand the people in your team and their preferences and their personalities, and then being able to adapt your style in a remote world to really be able to help support your people and get the best from them. And I think organisations, the bit that many are starting to realise is that most managers haven't worked in this way before, so they need support. They need, as you say, the backing of the organisation, and they need their confidence building to know that it's okay to try something and tweak it, and just really explore how to lead and manage in a different world.
I think it is. I think interesting. I think it is simpler than we've all been led to believe.
Mm-hmm.
I think there are only two things that you need to do to have a really firm basis, and that's a very clear understanding about where it is as an organisation you want to go, and a very clear understanding about how you want to engage with your people to understand whether or not we're on track to go there. If you have those two things, then a lot of the challenges that managers feel around mistrust, discomfort, lack of control, fear, a lot of those go away, because as soon as you know that things are okay, you start to relax and you pull back, and then you look less. And then as you look less, people feel like they're being trusted, and then you pull back even further. But we're overcomplicating it, I think. But we're on that journey.
And I think some of this comes down to what just good leadership and good management is initially. But we did this research and clustered it into sort of 12 different domains of virtual leadership, and some of it absolutely is good management as well. But equally, going into the virtual world, there are new benefits that you can uncover, like being able to tap into people, the best people for the role, despite the fact that they can't get to the office for whatever reason, whether that is disability or being a parent or whatever it is. That means that you can actually now tap into that, and you can also start to work in different ways. So you don't have to recreate the 9-to-5 office just as a virtual team and have lots of Zoom calls. You can work in asynchronous ways. So there are ways to be even more effective as a virtual manager than you would have just translated your working behaviors to be reasonably effective, but do that online.
That's a really interesting point, Ben, because there are several, I guess, themes that have emerged through this period of enforced remote working, where people have effectively, in the main, picked up their day job, moved it to another location, and they're struggling with things like guilt and burnout and overwork, which I guess, those things kind of contradict the common fears that managers had around, if we don't see our people, then are they really going to be productive if we're not looking over them all the time? And for all of us here, that is clearly a really outdated view, and it has no basis in reality, does it? Because we all know that the opposite is true, and that's now been proved beyond all, I guess, expectation. But from a management point of view, how can, I guess we've talked a little bit about, that introspective look, but and from a leadership style, how can managers overcome those challenges in themselves so that they can better manage their teams?
So, can I answer this one?
Go for it, Paul. Yeah, please do.
I think, again, it comes down to the role modeling. But I think it's about giving themselves permission to work less. It's going to sound like a completely bizarre thing to say. During lockdown, one of the things, we had lots of people doing work webinars, and I jumped on the bandwagon. I wanted to do webinars for free. And this is one of the things I talk about. It's what my business does. And I think one of the things that always resonated most with people is giving them the ability to switch off. And I know this sounds like a really, people are burning out. For the first 4 weeks of lockdown, I was personally the most productive person I had ever met. I was getting so much done, it was nuts. And my wife turned around to me one day and she said, Paul, she said, you go into the office at 8 in the morning, you come out at 6 o'clock in the evening, and bar, let's say 15 minutes for lunch, I don't see you for the whole day. And what was interesting is at that time, I'd actually felt myself starting to burn out. And I planned in what I call blue behavior. I planned in living time, time to not work, do exercise at the end of the day. But by the time I got to the end of the day, I was so shattered. It was all I could do to grab a glass of wine, go and sit on the sofa and watch the television. So I never really got round to it. And it struck me that why don't I actually plan some of that time into my day? And so from that moment on, I thought, well, I can't go on like this because I'm getting loads done, but now I'm shattered. And it means me taking like a week or 2 weeks off just to recover. So I decided that in order to get a life, you have to plan a life. And so what I do now is I put in what I call a foundation week. And I plan in at the beginning of every week. It actually goes on ad infinitum. It goes on into the future. When I start work, my mid-morning break, I plan in my exercise during the middle of the day and my lunch, a mid-afternoon break, and I plan in taking my dog for a walk at 5 o'clock, which is my signal to stop working. And what's fascinating is not only did I do my exercise, which was great, but I actually was more energized in the afternoon because I'd taken a break during the middle of the day. So I think there is this, we're talking about how do we make people more productive, get them to work less during the day because we're absolutely shattered. That is, I think, the greatest thing we can do. And I think you may have heard of a company called Green King, a pub company. And I don't know if any of you heard this, they instituted golden time in the middle of the day between 12:30 and 1:30. And they basically said that nobody is allowed to have a meeting, have a phone call, or do any work between 12:30 and 1:30 every day, because they wanted to give everybody a guilt-free opportunity to do no work and just get some downtime. Absolutely perfect.
Sounds like Kia did no meeting Tuesday as well, which is like just to get rid of all the meetings out of one day so you can perhaps do more productive work or work less. But I think I completely agree, Paul, on some of those things, but they're also, this guilt is often driven by sort of social pressure and just the social norms that everyone is working. And I don't know, maybe it works perfectly for you, but even you still work sort of till 5 o'clock. And this sort of 9 to 5 is so ingrained in society, and it's like, well, I almost have no one to go for lunch with or do anything in the afternoon because everyone's working. And these social norms were set 200 years ago in the industrial era, and we are, if you like, the frogs in just the water that's heating up in the saucepan at the moment. And the world outside has changed. We now have the tools to work whatever hours that we would like, you know, if that's in the evening or early in the morning, and then to take the sunshine afternoon hours off. You know, I live in Cornwall and like to go surfing, and it's quite unpredictable when the best surf's going to be. So actually having that ability to choose and to choose when I'm most productive and work then is really important. But we need to get better at noticing when we're being influenced by these social norms. You know, people have been commuting 4 hours a day for decades, and only in lockdown have they realized that that was crazy. You know, that was crazy before you went into lockdown. So we have to get better at noticing this stuff. It comes back to self-awareness, and then it's managers' job to help people find new norms. I love that, you know, block out golden time, but it's managers' jobs to let teams experiment with, or almost force them to experiment with new norms, whether that's golden time, whether that's stopping at people working a set number of hours. There's one Dutch law firm who've capped the number of hours you can work, which is the equivalent of 6 hours times 4 days a week times 47 weeks a year. They've capped it there. That's the most you can bill. And because in law, that law industry, it's one of the worst, most workaholic industries kind of there is. And I love, like, you do sometimes have to set these new, like, to give people a nudge to set some new social norms.
I've just got to say that there's a kind of craziness that's gone on to that norm. I totally get your point, which is I got into a discussion on LinkedIn with a chap the other day, and he was talking, and I basically said, I think this is a great idea to have this foundation week or whatever, you know, work when you want to work, and make sure you're planning your blue time. And one person actually came back to me and said, well, I don't want to do that. I want to go and do my commute because that's the only time I get to read. And it's like, do you not understand the craziness of what you've just said? You can plan to read. You don't have to be sat on a train to do it.
Well, maybe,
I think this is where it's ingrained behaviours, isn't it?
Of course.
Yeah, we've built these behaviours, like you said, over years, over decades, and far beyond that. We've inherited this style of working and management, and it all literally stopped overnight. We could only leave our house for an hour, you know, once a day. And I think if that wasn't a reset, I don't know what could be. And I think, you know, people have struggled. I call it time chunking, to your point, Paul. It's around planning what you can do and making sure you are keeping an eye on how well you are. And I know a lot of people who are suffering from the overwhelm and the burnout, and almost more now, even though we've got more freedom. It's quite bizarre, the change to the laptop approach. So it is creating those forced breaks. I think the organisations that are doing that are very much leading the way.
There's something as well, just really, really important, the tone from the top. And I think, you know, so where I work, we've been really, really lucky. We've got a really good leadership team who've really, really noticed. And yeah, we're comprised of exam boards. So, you know, I don't know if you've noticed, there's been some issues with exams this year, which means that we've had hundreds of people working 24 hours straight, pulling overnighters, and it's been hard. It's been really, really hard. But our engagement scores and our perceptions of leadership have shot up, mainly because the CEOs and the kind of directors we have really noticed and called it out and said to people, thank you, this is great. We do not expect you to do this in future. We do not expect this to be the norm. And that's so important, kind of giving that message. And the video messages from leaders saying, I'm off on holidays now, I won't be taking any emails, you need to take time off as well, is really, really important. Because people will you know, work 10-hour days, 12-hour days, people will burn out. And it's what you do to rescue that and bring it back and say, we've noticed you've done it, we don't want you doing it again. That kind of leadership behaviour is so important. And I think during COVID-19, that's been the biggest change for us, is the leadership behaviours and that real focus on noticing people. And that's, helping to say, just, we don't expect this to continue. We know that it does happen, but we don't want it to happen in future. And how do you manage that? So my colleagues at Cambridge University Press, for example, after a sort of particularly stressful period, just gave everyone a day's extra leave. Just said, go and have a day's extra leave. Take it whenever you want. And I think just those little touches which just notice when people are overworking and getting there, and that's so important.
Because I think we sometimes misunderstand burnout as well. It's not that people don't want to work hard for a purpose and for a goal and to achieve things, but you do have to have that time to switch off as well. Otherwise you accumulate these sort of emotional stresses that just build up, and then you're more susceptible to a trigger. And we focus too much on the trigger rather than, as managers, understanding our people, understanding where they're at, understanding what it is that they do to let off steam. And again, coming back to sort of individual choice, but allowing people to do that and supporting people to do whatever it is that allows them to sort of reset and come back down from that sort of emotional peak, if you like, of stress and of performance. It's not about having no stress, it's about balancing it over time, isn't it?
Yeah, it's understanding and it's empathy, and they're the two things which are just so important. That empathetic leadership, certainly during this period, is such a powerful kind of mechanism for bringing people along and helping people. It's so important.
And so we say in Hoxby, it's about turning your notifications off and not having a WhatsApp group as well. That means you can there are times when you can just get away from work and from the project team and whatever it is that you're working on.
I think that's really important. If I could add compassion and kindness are two of the absolute traits that have shone through, and I'm starting to see them slide away in some areas at the moment, which is so sad. And I'm really hoping that they'll continue in leadership. And the other thing that you made me think about was giving employees explicit permission. Quite often people do need to be told it's okay to take time off. Which is, and I know a number of organisations who've been doing that additional day off on a Friday once a month. They've been giving people a long weekend once a month, and people really cherish that. They're really looking forward to that, and also enabling people to feel that they can say, well, I can't actually do that task today because tomorrow's our Friday off, or whatever system. And I think it's recognising when people don't feel they can challenge back, and saying it's okay to challenge me. That's an admirable leadership quality to have.
I think that compassion and kindness is really important, but I think it starts with yourself as well. I think it's about being compassionate and kind to yourself. I mean, last week I was on holiday, and I do what I do. I have this mirror that reflects back at me what's going on, and I can see when I'm doing crazy stuff or when I'm just doing too much. But even I struggled. I was on a week off, and I sat there thinking, I could be working now. I could be getting ahead. I could be doing more. And I think that compassion and kindness, if it starts in here, then we start to model it. And then when we start to model it, that's when, because it doesn't really matter. Well, I'm going to temper what I was about to say there. I was going to say, it doesn't really matter what we say. I think it matters what we do. And we can say as much as we like to our people, go home, don't do that. But until they fundamentally believe that we mean it, they are not going to listen to it. And I think as soon as we listen to it in ourselves and we model it, I think that's when the world starts to change.
I think that's a really important point, particularly in terms of people preparing for the uncertainty and not knowing what's ahead, because we don't have a track record for what's ahead. And many people are, what if we go into another lockdown? What if? And the stress bucket's filling up and needs emptying. But it's also about, we'll manage. We managed before. We'll support each other through. But taking that time out, recharging is so critical.
Absolutely. Well, it's no. I mean, I think the recharge is the really important thing, and I think that there's this. I don't think a lot of managers have realised that analogy. I mean, we say it, but they don't really realise it, because I do something called a discovery, a diary detox discovery, and one of the things I ask people at the very beginning, ask the group, is how many hours above their contracted hours do they work, and usually they'll come back and they're saying every single day, they're working between 1 and 4 hours more than their contract says every day. And that's an average number. Average, not just individuals. And some people are obviously saying 4 hours. And what's crazy there is that up until recently, I was just reflecting that back to the person who brings me in as just a number. People are working 1 hour more. And it's almost like people were going, yeah, and so what? And I thought, wow, how are you not getting this? And so what I've done is I've now turned it into an analogy, and I've assumed, well, look, if we assume that we're going to be working 8 hours a day, and I guess that I totally get that is a model that we've created, and it's an artificial model, I get that. But if we're working 8 hours a day, then we should be not working for 16. And so if you then take that number of hours on average that people are working over their contracted hours every day as a percentage of that 16 hours of downtime, and you put it into a battery, and you show that every single week that battery is down at 86%. What you're hoping that's going to show people is that that's never going to get charged back up again. And every week you do it, it's going to keep coming down and down and down until you start taking time. So I think we have to change the message about what working longer hours really means. You don't get to recover, and that doesn't come back. To your point, Ben.
Yeah. And we try and do that. I think it's a constant challenge as well for people to do it. But we talk about setting, like you say, planning your time. So set your work style, then project it. So tell everyone about it. Put it on your status, put it on your email signature, whatever it is you need to do. Tell people what it is you're protecting, what time you're protecting, and then as managers, it's about respecting other people's, and it has to be so core to your team. We have it as a core value. It's up to every individual then to respect that, but it does take time, and it requires constant time and effort to make sure that that's working for you as well.
That leads us really nicely on to my final question for you, Will, which is around how, as people develop a work style, to use your Hoxby lingo, Ben, it is a great description of what's emerging, isn't it? Because people are finding that actually, and the research is picking it up, lots of people overwhelmingly want a blend of and choice of remote working and location-based working in an office or elsewhere. When they're able to do that safely, they want that blend. There are a pocket of people that would like to work remotely exclusively. There are a pocket of people that want to work in the office exclusively, but overwhelmingly people want a blend, don't they? So from a management perspective, what does that look like, and how can organizations support managers as they develop that work style for themselves?
Yeah, we're trying to get it in the dictionary, that work style, for next year. Yeah, so
I love it.
Great that you guys are picking it up. So I agree, lots of people want different things. So I think the thing comes back to starting with choice, but also from a management perspective, enabling this widespread adoption of work style will make it possible for millions more people to actually join the workforce and to be able to get the best people, the best talent doing their best work that they can do. Whether that is people who are caring for others, people with autism, people with long-term illness, disability, mental health, parents, older people, whatever it is. And therefore this work style, and I would challenge people, really don't think what you need from the office, think what it is. And if it's just a barrier from your work life, there are other ways to do that than to commute straight back into central London or central city, wherever it is that you used to work. So really think a bit about that. And then for managers, it's really about, I would say, being inclusive for the most remote person. Try not to create these cliques of the people that come into the office and the people that work from home, because that used to be the problem, was people who work from home were sort of subconsciously penalized, whether it was through sort of presenteeism or whether people just thought they were snacking in their pajamas and not quite working as hard, whatever it was. So we got this kind of clique and disadvantage for people out of the office. So take just the principle of communicate for the most remote person in your team. And that might be, you need to communicate and think about accessibility and all the rest of it in terms of how you communicate for different groups of people. And then you also need to think about how you really measure by output and how you're going to really judge performance. Because actually, by bringing all these other groups into the workplace, you can have much greater diversity. You can really drive that diversity agenda, and that leads to better outcomes. There's lots of research on this, but that sort of collective intelligence of different people, if you have the right enabling sort of management style, leads to better performance outcomes. So if you need to set up ways to actually measure by output, and we do that by doing everything as sort of a task-based deliverable, and that's how people are remunerated within Hoxby. And that's something that's perhaps far away from some organizations, but it's worth thinking about. It's worth thinking about how you can sort of restructure work to reward, I would also say reward teams rather than just individuals, if that's the sort of behavior you're trying to change as well.
Yeah, can I jump in there? Yeah, there's a pragmatic point. I think that, we certainly, when we started looking at flexible working a while ago, we had the statutory minimums where you can only make one application for flexible working in a 12-month period, and if If that gets rejected, you've got to wait another year before you ask for flexible working again. And so what that meant is that people were really kind of researching their options, and generally everyone was ending up with working from home, because that seems to fit everything. And you put in your application and a manager looks on a piece of paper and goes yes or no. If they say yes, you change your contract and that's it, you're done. You work from home for the rest of your life. And if the manager says no, you get upset and you wait another year. So my advice to managers who are working with policies which are based on the statutory minimums is to ignore your organisational policies and encourage people to enter into a dialogue about flexible working, because it will change for individuals. And and to give people choice and to say, okay, this you can't work from home because your job is this, but you can do X, Y, and Z, and we'll see how it goes for 2 weeks, and we'll check back in and we'll see again, and we just keep that dialogue going. And I think that's so important, that managers aren't bound to a policy which gets in the way of actually offering people genuine flexibility and allowing them to change their mind and understand what works and provide choice. So, yeah, I don't want to rabble-rouse and tell everyone to ignore all their organisational policies, but also I think
what you just did.
That's what you're going to do.
I've done it now.
So something like 97% of people are going to do the right thing, will do the right thing anyway. And so you're designing a policy for 3% of people that don't, and those 3% will probably break the policy anyway.
Yeah.
So designing it for 3% of your organisation is the wrong thing to do. This sort of organisational scar tissue and stuff that builds up is the wrong approach. You're right. We need to try and smash through policies and the bureaucracy around it and give people the choice. That's sort of the fundamental principle, I think, that we've all passionate on.
Flexibility, how we work, is a conversation. It's not a policy thing. It's a conversation. It's about how you work. It's dialogue. Nothing really more than that. It shouldn't need to be policy. And I think I'm wary at the moment of people wanting to change their contracts because they're worried that flexibility is going to become inflexibility in future. And I think it comes back to trust. And we shouldn't be asking people to change their contracts and sacrifice bits of their pension or salary or anything like that. We should be just saying it's an ongoing dialogue, and we'll just talk about it and figure out what works for you. We'll support you. That's what it should be.
I think that's brilliant, because we managed to flip over to being based from home in 48 hours, and we didn't need policies, we didn't need contract changes, and the best remote flexible working cultures that I've either been in or been around or created, we haven't needed formal flexible working requests. In 3 years, when I first created, one request. And I think it talks to how do we reassure people that this can go forward, and actually flexibility needs to be flexible. So if you put it in a box, it's inflexible. So it seems really, really strange. So I think, you're absolutely right. Conversations, output focused, helping people be part of a team focus really takes it away from the all about me club and really breaks it into what can we do as a team to support each other, what do we need to deliver, where do we need to be, how often do we need to connect and recharge our team battery, to the analogy about batteries, and organisational battery, and really taking it a step further to cultural change. And I often say, culture eats policy for breakfast, never mind strategy. Culture will eat the policy for breakfast. It's the way we do things around here that needs to change.
Yeah, 100% agree with that.
That seems like the perfect note to end on, I think. So thank you all. So, sorry, Paul, I can tell that's a devastating blow.
Can I just say one last thing?
Please do. Hit us with your wisdom for the final note for this brilliant session.
Well, look, we've all heard the term necessity breeds invention. And I think one of the biggest traps managers fall into is thinking that they're the person that has to come up with all the answers.
Yeah.
Your people are incredibly creative and they want flexible working more than you do. Mm-hmm. So if somebody comes to you and say, I want flexible working, ask them how they'd make it work. You will be shocked by the answer you get. A, they will not want flexible working in the way you thought they did, but also their ability to be creative about making it work is unparalleled. So just don't take it all on your shoulders. Give them the opportunity and they will surprise you.
Awesome.
Hopefully that was worthy of the last word.
Can I also just point people, is it all right to, we've got loads of free resources and things on the virtual stand. at this conference. So free resources to download to help people set their own work style, more information on some of the research as well on virtual and remote teams and remote leadership. So that's all sort of, please do go and check it out, and it's all free to take away. So
thanks, Ben. Thanks for that. For now, huge thanks to everyone for your time and insights and energy and brilliant thoughts there. And yeah, there's so much practical advice for people watching. So yeah, can't thank you enough. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
thanks.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.
Customary wave at the end of the Zoom.
Yeah, let's all wave. Hi, and welcome back to Flexpo Business. I'm Ursula Tavender, the Content Director here at the Flexpo Event Series, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Dagmar Albers, who's the Diversity and Inclusion Lead at Pfizer. And she's been leading a strategy and a programme at Pfizer in the UK to close the gender pay gap. So let's kick off with some questions for you, Dagmar. It's great to see you. Thanks for joining us today. So first, an introduction to the project, and how did you decide that flexible working would be right for the teams at Pfizer?
Hi. Yeah, Pfizer is actually a biopharmaceutical company, right? And they are very, very patient-centric, and they are guided by our 4 values, which are courage, joy, equity, and excellence. So discovering and delivering breakthroughs that change patients' lives is really at the core of everything we do, right? From driving our mindset and culture to motivating the business decisions we make. Our ambition is really to be as diverse as the patients and communities we serve. And this is actually where I come in. So last July, I started as the D&I lead for Pfizer UK. And this, as you said already, in this role, my main purpose is to close the gender pay gap. So with this goal in mind, I have set up 5 work streams, and one of which involves actually bringing everyday flexibility to life and making it really work for everyone in the company. Not only has this been proven to be one of the most effective interventions to close the gender pay gap, but introducing this culture at Pfizer that will create a trusting and flexible workplace culture that attracts the best talent to the organization, and of course encourages employees to achieve work-life harmony through bringing their best self to work. And that is really important to us, that everybody can be their best self. And whilst everyday flexibility at Pfizer is already really embraced by many colleagues and teams, right? It really works here. We have all the technology stuff in place. I can't say that word. There's also a little bit of confusion around it, what it really is, what it looks like on a day-to-day basis, and who is it for, especially in these new times, having COVID, right? So it's essential for all colleagues in the company to actually have the same understanding of what flexible working is, how to make it work for everyone, giving managers the support and the tools. They need to have the right conversations with their teams to overcome all the challenges. So that's our way forward. The situation, I said already, COVID-19, really working practices have of course been transformed. And then that really helped us to accelerate our work on this. And we are now in a situation at Pfizer where not all, but many colleagues must work from home, right? And I call this forced remote working because it really comes with its own challenges. And one being that colleagues don't necessarily work as flexibly as they actually could.
So tell us about what you did.
Well, at the very first Flexpo last year, the first thing I did was meeting you, actually. Yeah. And I would say we hit it off straight away.
We did.
And you gave me advice. We did, yes. And you gave me advice. And you really said you really need to accelerate the already widespread adoption of flexible working, or the culture we had within Pfizer, right? Yeah. So, and you told me the best way of achieving this is to enable teams to create a culture of trust, exceptional communication, and high performance through a team pact. right? And I thought this sounds really good. So, and what is a flexible team pact? This is actually a document every team member contributes to, helps to shape, and also commits to. That's really important. And what was truly amazing when we kickstart the strategy is that it tapped so well into all of our 4 core values I talked about already. Because a team pact is really an amazing thing to do, to be honest, because it really helps you to build this highly engaged team culture based on trust, collaboration, accountability, and autonomy. This is what flexible working is all about, and this actually taps totally into our value of equity. Second thing is, it really helps to provide very clear expectations on delivery and performance, and actually to facilitate also improve performance management, which of course is all about excellence, right? Yeah. To get improved, to get to improved ways of working, and then also, which is really important at Pfizer, enhance the well-being and energy management is so important for us. This is all about joy, right? And we are really proud that people can be and come with their best self to work. And energy management and well-being are really big topics at Pfizer, and we really look after our colleagues. And finally, a team pact really helps a team to overcome the barriers that prevent them of being able to work flexibly, right? By addressing actually the issues at a local level, and very open and very transparent and very honest. Yeah. And that certainly takes courage. So it taps into our 4th value here.
It just was a match made in heaven, wasn't it? That kind of the process that I've used and would recommend, like you said, so beautifully into those 4 values of Pfizer. It just I was amazed when I saw that.
Me too.
So let's talk about challenges then. So have you faced any challenges while kind of rolling out the Team Pact training program, and what have you done to overcome them?
Yes and no, actually, because I definitely didn't face any challenges from my leadership team, right? Our UK board is amazing. They're fully on board with all the gender pay gap activities, and I have even standing, I'm every 3 months they meet, and I always have my time with them. So I'm always a standing item on their agenda, which is amazing and really helps. One challenge we have is actually the sheer number of colleagues we have, 2,500 in the UK alone, because we are a really big pharmaceutical company. And many of them working already in regional or global teams. So, and then you ask yourself, how do you actually train an organization of this scale? Right? And we decided to go for train the trainer approach, because I just can't do it all on my own, and you can't do either, right? So we decided that together, and because we rolled out this innovation program a few years ago, I just kind of thought that is a good way to do it. So we trained colleagues up, we call flexible working champions, to deliver these workshops to colleagues, peer to peer. So that is really important. And the role of these champions is to build a sustainable culture of flexible working at Pfizer through guiding a team through the entire team pact process and beyond. So far, we have trained up 20 colleagues with passion and interest to take on this role. It's important that they commit a certain amount of the time to actively participate in flexible working activities, and also to seek opportunities to apply and share flexible working principles within Pfizer. They really role model what flexible working looks like and live and breathe the culture we are striving to achieve. And of course, the biggest challenge had been COVID-19, as we originally planned and really thought that's the only way to run these as a face-to-face workshop, right? And our very first workshop was face-to-face, took us a whole day. And then all of a sudden COVID hit us, and we've been forced to actually make them virtual, right? And it took us some time to transform the entire content. But surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, it actually resulted in virtual. It actually works much, much better than face-to-face. We can roll it out much faster and at a higher volume through not wasting time traveling, because we are across the entire UK. And we can literally reach colleagues in the furthest corners of the UK, which is fantastic. And that was really, really helpful. Plus, when you do it face to face, people just do talk a lot. What you want them to do? But then they forgot to write down what they have talked about. So very often the team pact in the end was empty. While when we're doing it virtually, as you know best, Ursula, they have the discussion and we are doing the typing. So in the end, they have this document with literally everything they have said. Nothing gets lost. And this is actually quite amazing.
It's taught us a lot, hasn't it, I think, this time about what's possible. And we've learned so much, haven't we, with the tools that Pfizer has, and the kind of making the process smoother,
Yes.
which has just been great for both of us learning, I think, hasn't it? I think one thing that really paralyzes companies and can really hold them back from accelerating that widespread adoption of flexible working is the problem that they perceive that they can't offer the same thing to everyone. So they see that people will have a problem with it, people in the organization will have a problem with that if they can't offer the same options for flexible working for everybody. But what I'd like to talk about now is how the team pact helps to tackle that challenge, because that's something that in the first workshop that we ran, was a question that came up with a couple of the managers, wasn't it? So how does the team pact tackle that?
So at Pfizer, we offer, of course, a full range of flexible working options to colleagues based on the requirement, provided it is compatible with the role, because it needs to work, right? However, the team pact is not about making contractual changes, right? So it's not about making formal flexible working agreements. Instead, the team pact is all about informal flexible working at a time and place that works best for them in terms of productivity, energy, and of course, positive outcomes, whilst effectively managing commitments outside of work. And that's the great thing about the team pact. Working flex means something different to everyone. And as a team, they need to agree what works for them, both individually and as a team. And there's an appreciation that this requires compromise and certainly isn't a free-for-all. It's about the outcome produced and not the number of hours worked. This is what I preach all the time.
Yeah.
And it's about challenging. And it's about challenging the almost natural course of judgment that can lead to making assumptions about team members instead of trusting each other to deliver really in a way that works for them. Because every person is different, right? They're night owls, they're early morning birds. So this is what it's about. And actually all the colleagues always do deliver, right? We also encourage a test, learn, and adapt approach. I'm really big in experimentation. And it's really all about testing out what works for you and for your team. And if it does not work, amend it, right? Just be honest and transparent about it and adapt. That is what I really would like to see more, this experimenting thing, right?
Yeah.
The team pact isn't really intended to be a binding document, but instead will continue to evolve and shift alongside changing personal projects and working environments, right? Because in the moment you have a new colleague coming in, you need to bring them in. In the moment the working environment might change, you might need to discuss it again. Does it make sense?
It makes complete sense. And I think having it as a live document makes a huge difference, because it can be tweaked when things aren't working, and that taps into the test, learn, and adapt approach that I think colleagues at Pfizer are really inspired by that. And when we've been through the workshop, they seem to take that on board, don't they? And your encouragement of for them to take ownership of the pact as a live document really, I think, is quite empowering for them. And when we have those conversations, and for some of them it seems like it's the first time they're able to have that kind of open conversation with colleagues about how they feel about flexible working and what holds them back, and how they feel about it generally. But what impact, let's talk about the impact of the pact in relation to how it helps them to improve that communication with each other and therefore trust each other more. How does it impact that?
It is all about, as you said, trust and communication.
Yeah.
Trusting themselves, that's quite interesting, but also trusting their teams to deliver and their team might, right? But also the team knowing that the manager is fine with all this and actually does does trust them to deliver, right? It's quite interesting to see that even close-knit teams never really talk about the way they work or like to work. It's fascinating, right?
Yeah.
And nearly all colleagues make assumptions about each other and have quite deep set beliefs, right? Like, and this is fascinating, like, I need to be always available, otherwise people might think I'm slacking. What will people think of me when I miss a call? Can I really nip out quickly to the post office for 5 minutes? Or even can I even nip out 2 minutes to go to the loo, right? Or can I go for a run and take a break? So this feeling of guilt can be found at all levels of the organization. Fascinating. Because a lot of this is really rooted in the old ways of working and the belief that a working day has to be from 9 to 5. Which of course, it's not true, but a lot of people still believe it. It's ingrained, you know, it's what you just learned, especially if you're a little bit older and brought up like this. Just talking about this in the team pact session really unlocks massive potential. There's often a complete surprise and relief that everyone makes the same assumptions about each other, which often are actually not holding true, right? So the number of times this comes up during the workshop really creates trust, as well as team members becoming genuinely interested in understanding their colleagues' personal circumstances and how people really tick and work most effectively, right? So we also help teams become better communicators, as miscommunication, or even worse, lack of communication actually, is often responsible of the trust breaking down. And then also people are human making machines. So what you intend to say is not necessarily what then the person B is perceiving, right? So all these things play definitely a role.
And what about overwork and burnout then? Because that's been I think it's been a massive problem, hasn't it? Not just at Pfizer, but in the wider working world with people, in this forced remote working situation. And, what's come up time and time again in the workshop is, as you've said, that communication and those assumptions that people are making. But how does the team pact kind of help to address that well-being side of flexible working and the risk to colleagues' well-being that they will work too much? Because I know it has come up, isn't it, lots of times that people are working too much.
I mean, the situation with COVID and being forced to work remotely from home really doesn't help, right? And when we run the sessions, we really hear from people that they really do not take any breaks, right? Yeah. That they really have the feeling that they always need to be available 24/7. Right? And they really assume that they let colleagues down the moment they are not glued to a laptop. Yeah. Because there's also this interesting belief that one is only working when sitting behind the laptop, right? Not realizing that in order to create an environment that breeds innovation, which is exactly what we're striving for at Pfizer, colleagues often need to step outside or have a thinking time, right? And that can be on the train, that can be in answering emails, that can be at the hairdressers, right? Whenever I sit at the hairdresser in the middle of the day, quite often, I'm just answering emails, I'm on my Teams app, I'm on Yammer, which is our social media thing. So you're still working, right? You're even building rapport with colleagues over a more informal chat, right? So this is all work too, and people quite often don't realize that because they really think I need to sit behind my laptop and that is when I'm working. It's just simply not true. And just making them aware of that already helps, right? And it really breaks down these assumptions a lot for the teams. And we also have a section in the team pact where we talk about how we will support each other, which is a really important part of it. And another step is where we talk about a risk mitigation plan. Comes with experimentation too. But what are the risks, in this case, overworking, and what can we do about it today? And that is then the solution for that is actually checking in on each other on a regular basis, definitely in team meetings, really not really only asking, how are you, but how are you really, right? Sharing the workload more effectively, really prioritizing as a team much better, and just being more open and honest who has which workload and who actually does need some help, right? Because that happens a lot, that people are not talking about this. But with this, it really helps to open them up. And they also need to learn to push back and actually say no in an elegant way, and that is what people also do. Saying no is one of the hardest things, right? Because you don't want to disappoint anybody. You don't want to let people down. But what people also need to learn, and colleagues, is that they need to protect themselves and their health. So, and that is something we do too.
Yes, I think setting those boundaries is it's a new skill for some people, and that can be such a cause of the burnout, can't it? Because so many teams working remotely have found themselves with more work than ever, and it sort of contradicts how you might have thought this time might go. But so many people have found themselves with increased workloads. I think that kind of opening up the communication channels and giving teams the opportunity to talk about this stuff is so impactful, isn't it? Let's move on then to talk about colleagues that sort of might still feel a bit resistant to the idea of flexible working and aren't perhaps convinced that it's right for them. How have you dealt with that?
That's why I call it experimenting, or test, learn, adapt approach. You know, I'm a massive fan of it. And really let teams know throughout the entire workshop, at the beginning and at the end, that the pact is really a living document which needs amendment over time, right? So because we talk here about a mindset shift and a behavior shift, right? So it's quite big actually, and it's easier said than done. So it's really all about testing it out, see what works and what doesn't. The majority of colleagues really embrace it and truly want it. Of course, you always have some colleagues, right, who simply do not want to work flexibly or can't imagining it. And that's actually fine too, right? Just the team just needs to know and talk about it, right? And there are some managers for sure. And I just talked this morning with one colleague who a bit insecure about the whole thing and really don't trust that people really deliver the outcome, which is quite interesting.
Yeah.
And then having this workshop with them, actually even engaging in having this workshop is already a hard thing, right? But we're getting there slowly. As I said, we're talking about a really massive behavior change, right? So of course there will be some hiccups in teams. It would be silly to think there wouldn't, and everything is smooth. Of course it's not, you know, and there will be colleagues who don't stick to the commitments. That some colleagues will default back to old behaviors, right? And that is actually why we check in with the teams on a regular basis to really how it's going, right? It's just implementing it, it's not enough. We really need to ensure that they actually sustain it and really embed it, right? To really see also what works and what does not, where amendments need to be made. And the teams really need to talk through those barriers. What we also do is actually we're having a Yammer campaign, and I have a little picture which is called Flexible Working Top Tips, and I really encourage teams to share those flexible working top tips so that actually they can see what other teams are doing, and more teams are doing it. So it tells you, we are doing it, right? But also here what works for us. And then other people can get inspired by this and maybe can steal with pride some of those working practices.
Stealing with pride, I love that. Shameless theft. I just think that's brilliant. So that leads me quite nicely actually on to the next thing I wanted to talk to you about, which was about continuing the conversation and how, particularly around performance as well. So what happens next after they've gone through that initial process? How do they continue that conversation and monitor performance?
So the last pact of the team is really what are your commitments as a team and as an individual, which is really powerful. It was a good move of yourself putting that in, actually.
The commitments, it just brings it all together, doesn't it, those commitments?
It's fantastic. So most teams actually committed to put their team pact on the team meeting agenda as a standing item. So this is really good. So they keep on talking about this. And most of them also nominate the one person who is then bringing it together and holding everybody true to that, right? We also one of our graduates, brilliant lady, invented a tool in the workshop which really measures at the start where each team member stands when it comes to flexible working. How well are they doing at it, right? And many teams use this now as a temperature check to see if they can move the needle regarding productivity and well-being in the direction where it actually should go, right? And as I said, the champions also check in with the teams on a regular basis, as do I.
Yeah, super. So let's wrap up then. What do you think the greatest outcomes have been in this process of implementing clean packs and introducing this program to the teams at Pfizer?
Oh, so many. Actually, the passion of the champions who really drive it, who really reach out to teams and talk them into taking a team pact, right? I have some champions where some teams don't have a chance to say no. It's awesome. And that's what you need, because it is this peer-to-peer conversation, which is really powerful than rather the top telling everybody you have to do it, right? Like peer-to-peer really means they really believe in it and they really convince each other. And that's just fantastic. Then once you running the workshops, it's so rewarding because the energy and the passion of the teams participating is amazing.
It is. And
we have created this picture of posting on Yammer, which is actually next to this. So we have lots of pictures for the Yammer campaign. So one is, of course, flexible working top tips, but also one which is saying it's bright green. We've made the pact. So they post this picture, we made the pact. And then underneath, the colleagues talk about why they've done it, what it did mean to them, and what impact it had already, right? And then all the colleagues usually come in and talk about it, and that creates a lot of attention. And that is like, so, oh, they're doing it, why haven't we done it as a team? So it creates this curiosity, right? And the domino effect I want to see. So they start to share top tips, as I said, they keep on talking about it. And this really creates this open and transparent working culture, right? And this domino effect, which I really think is so important. And that really helps people to see it works. People are enthusiastic about it, and then they say, oh, I want to have this too. And so far, we only started in June, right? So we made the very first test one in February, where we tested it and adapted it. Then it took us kind of a month to adapt it to virtual. And then we got slowly, and then it took a bit of time for people to actually find their feet during the situation with COVID and homeschooling and I don't know what. So we really kicked off in June. And in the first 3 months, we ran 20 workshops. And that actually includes a holiday time in August where not a lot of things happened, right? Because in August, we only had 4. So most of these 20 happened really in June and July. For September and October, we have already 18 more workshops booked in. Actually, as of today, it's actually 25, I think. In total, that counts for 500 employees, which is actually already a fifth of the UK workforce within just the first 5 months. So that alone, I think, shows the interest and engagement and the need of colleagues, I would say. And of course, most importantly, you can see already the change in teams, right? Because you're checking in with them on a regular basis. Because they made the pact, they talked about trust and communications. Colleagues already do take more breaks, which is great. They feel less guilty, they have less stress, they manage their time more effectively, and thus are more productive, right? So people at Pfizer are anyway very productive, but now they're even more so, right? And of course, they trust each other even more than before. And managers also have less stress too, as colleagues stop to seek permission for every break they take, right? Because that can be actually a burden for managers too. Like, can I do this? Can I do that? Just think if a team of 10 or 12 people and everybody comes to you and asks non-stop for permission, right? So they just do it now, and they know their manager trusts them to deliver, because that's what it's about, delivering output and not working a certain number of hours. And teams are happier, right? So as some of the previous pressure has been taken off them, all this feeling of guilt, all the assumptions they used to make, ultimately, I think we're helping the employees at Pfizer to be more effective, to be more satisfied, to be more happy, while it's also taking huge strides towards achieving a more diverse and reflective workforce. Because the number of women, senior women walking out of the workforce, because they can't work flexibly, is quite high.
Yeah.
And I really don't want to see that anymore, to be honest.
I think that the gender balance piece is such an important part of this, but beyond that, the impact on this for everyone, I think, is so found, isn't it? And especially in this time when they've got that additional pressure and stress and uncertainty, have that kind of opportunity to work together as a team. It's not only reassuring for the manager, because there's such a question mark over how to manage people working differently. It's a collaborative way of answering all the challenges and pressures that come with this time, and as we move forward into this kind of new world of work, however that looks, as we're dealing with the different phases of this pandemic. So I can't thank you enough for being so open and sort of talking about what we've been doing the last few months, and it's been an absolute joy working with you on it, and it's such a privilege to get to collaborate with you, and to sort of hear you talking about what we've been doing over the last few months and sort of piece it all together. Has just been quite a lovely experience. So thank you so much, Dagmar, for talking to us today and for sharing this case study. I think it will be really useful for others, and be really inspiring as to how they can tangibly help their teams through this time and beyond. So thank you so much.
Highly welcome.